Well, good morning, grandchildren. I've got another Curious George. Lots of Curious George. Our friend gave us several of these books to use. I'm taking really good care of them because they're nice books, so I can return them. Anytime somebody loans you something, I always try to take really good care of it because it belongs to them, and so you want them to be able to get it back in as good a shape or better than when they gave it to you. This story is called Curious George Goes Camping. Curious George Goes Camping. Whatever happens to Curious George in this story is good enough for him. Anybody goes camping leaves a perfectly good house, plumbing, air conditioning to go sleep on the ground. I don't know. This is George. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. This weekend, George and his friend, the man with the yellow hat, had special plans. They were going camping. Woo! Look at there, and he's helping. That's good. I see the word tent is written on that box that the man in the yellow hat's got there. All right. It's going to be fun. And I think it says Dolman instead of Coleman. At the campsite, the man with the yellow hat unpacked their gear while George looked at all the tents. And one was just the right size for a puppy. We'll see if we can find that puppy. There were even tents on wheels. Would you like to help me put up our tent, George? The man asked. See if you can find the puppy in a tent. Where's the puppy? You see one in a tent? I see one running across the ground. How about George? Do you see George? Where's the man in the yellow hat? There's the tent on wheels right there. We call those pop-ups, pop-up campers. George was happy to help. It would not be hard to set up a tent, he thought, but it wasn't easy. George, why don't you fill your bucket with water at the pump, his friend suggested. We need it by our campfire later when we roast marshmallows. So there goes George trying to set up the tent. It looks easy, but I think it's a little more difficult than he thought. They're having trouble. Fell on both of them. Marshmallows. George loved marshmallows. He couldn't wait to try them roasted. Now, don't wander off and get into trouble, the man warned. But George didn't hear him. He was already gone. Yeah, I figured that's going to happen. Yep. So there he is warning George. George grabs a bucket and takes off. Oh boy, I hope he doesn't get into too much trouble. At the pump, George worked the handle up and down. Soon his bucket was full. On the way back down the trail, he saw a family packing up. George watched a girl pour her bucket of water on the campfire. The fire sizzled out. George thought that looked like fun. So look at that pump right there, Titus. Now you have a pump just like that. You sure do. Yours is a little shinier than that. Can you pump the pump outside? And there's the little girl throwing water on the campfire. George thinks that looks exciting. He poured his bucket of water on the next campfire. Oh no. Hey, yelled a camper. We weren't finished with that yet. The camper began to chase George, but George didn't mean to cause trouble. Now he only wanted to hide. He ran into the forest as fast as he could, but the camper's footsteps were close behind. George ran faster and faster. The footsteps came closer and closer until suddenly, whoo-wee, look at him throwing water on the fire. And over here he is running like a wild man. He needs to go fast. But the footsteps are getting closer and closer. They were passing George. Why, it was not a camper chasing George now. It was a deer. What fun to run with a deer. Forgetting all about the camper and the marshmallows, George ran after the deer. But a little monkey cannot run as fast as a deer in the woods. Before long, George was lost, and he felt all alone. He felt tired, and he stopped to rest. At first, he was worried. He was very far from camp. So there's the deer that jumped over him. Boing! And look at the rabbits hiding behind the tree. Can you see the rabbits? And there's George. Now he's lost in the woods. Poor George. Here he is sitting on a log, just kind of contemplating life, wondering what is he going to do. But there were lots of other animals to keep him company. He saw a lizard sunning on a rock and a squirrel chatting in a tree. Then he saw the tail of a black and white kitty peeking out from under a bush. A white and black kitty? He was curious. Would the kitty like to play? Why would a kitty be in the woods? Ooh. George gently pulled the kitty out. So here's the woods he's in. Can you see all of the animals? I'm going to name some of them for you. There's a raccoon. Those look like woodchucks or otters maybe. A bear, maybe a deer, little teddy bear, some birds, a deer, a moose maybe. We know this is not a mama deer and daddy deer. Mama deers don't have antlers. Squirrels, another deer. Whoa, that's a weird deer. Oh, what's he doing here? George is about to grab the tail of, I don't think that's a kitty cat. Do you? George gently pulled the kitty out. But it was not a kitty. It was a skunk. And it was scared. The skunk lifted its tail and sprayed. Psst. Whoo! The spray smelled awful. The animals tried to get away too. George wanted to get away, but he could not. The smell was all over him. How could he ever get rid of that awful smell? He wondered. Too bad he could not take a bath in the woods. So look at there. Psst. It's spray. Skunks spray a smelly, smelly spray on enemies, people that try to hurt them. And the skunk thought George was trying to hurt him. Look at all the animals hiding their faces. They're trying to get away from stinky George. Look at the smell following off of him. What's he going to do? What is he going to do? Then George had an idea. He could wash the smell off in the creek. He jumped into the cold water. He splashed and scrubbed, but he still felt smelly. And now he was wet too. What could he do? George thought if he climbed way, way up into a high tree, the smell would blow away. No, even dry and high up in a tree, George did not smell better. Poor George. He wished he hadn't wandered so far from camp. He wished he were roasting marshmallows with his friend. Suddenly George heard footsteps heading toward him. Someone was indeed coming. So here he is. He jumps into the water, splash. Washes and washes and washes. Climbs a tree. Nothing's working. He's up in a tree now, stinky. But he hears footsteps. I wonder who it is. Do you think it's the camper that's mad at him? It was forest animals, but they ran right by him. They had seen something scary, and George saw it too. It was a fire. George had gotten into trouble for putting out one fire, but this fire wasn't in the campground. This was an emergency. George climbed down the tree, grabbed his bucket, scooped it full of water in the creek. Then, being careful not to spill it, he climbed back up and he swung from branch to branch through the trees, heading toward the fire. Look at the fire. Oh no, look at all the animals running. Can you see the animals running? So George grabs water, climbs a tree and starts swinging toward the fire as fast as he can. Oh George, what are you going to do? When George got close enough to the fire, he reached down and poured water on the flames. Out went the fire with a big hiss. Just then, George's friend rushed out of the forest with a ranger. Look at him. He's throwing water on the fire. Wow. George, he called, I was afraid you would be here. It's a good thing you were here, George, the ranger said. We saw smoke from the campground, but you put this fire out just in time. George was glad to help, and the man with the yellow hat was glad to see George and safe, but he had a funny look on his face. George, he asked, what is that smell? Ooh. Well, the fire's out. but George still stinketh. He stinketh. Do you know who that was said about in the Bible? He stinketh. Yeah, ask your mommy. I bet she'll know. Back at the campfire, George's friend helped him get rid of the awful smell. After a strange bath in tomato juice, George smelled fine. So if you take a bath in tomato juice, it makes a skunk smell go away. And look at all the people offering her tomato juice. I always carry a case of tomato juice with me when I go camping. Always. Because, I mean, you just never know when you're going to need a case of tomato juice. Then the man with the yellow hat invited the ranger to cook dinner with them over their small campfire. Fires can be nice if you're careful, said the ranger. And there they are, roasting marshmallows. George is drying off. Hey, there's some animal friends that have come to visit them. Can you find a rabbit? Uh-huh. I have no idea what that creature is. Maybe it's a raccoon. George agreed. Fires are nice for roasting marshmallows, but one should never play with a fire. Fires can hurt you, and they can destroy the people and the things you love the most. There's George. Wow, look at those marshmallows. He's cooking 3 marshmallows at once. I am all for a marshmallow roast anytime you would like. I love you, children.